Dr. Maureen O'Sullivan.
Thank you, Chair. And my question relates to live hare coursing, the RHD2 virus, but also the results of a recent poll, all of which is indicating that hare coursing has no place in a modern civil society, and your views on the matter.
Thank you, Deputy. The control of live hare coursing, including the operation of individual coursing meetings and managing the use of hares for that activity, is carried out under the Greyhound Industry Act 1958, which is the responsibility of my colleague, the Minister for Agriculture, Food and the Marine. But my responsibility relates to the conservation status of the hare. But while the regulation of hare coursing is not under my statutory control, licences are required by the Irish Coursing Club under the terms of the Wildlife Acts on behalf of their affiliated clubs to facilitate the netting and tagging of hares for closed park meetings. And the annual licence to capture and tag hares for the 2019-2020 coursing season was issued by my department on the 9th of August this year. And the licences granted by my department in such instances include a range of conditions in relation to coursing hares, which are designed to provide as much protection as possible to the conservation status of the hare. And the Deputy is aware that the RHD2 virus, which affects both rabbits and hares, was discovered in a number of rabbits and hares across the country during the summer. And based on these results, RHD2 appears to be widespread, appeared at the time to be widespread in Ireland. So the scientific advice available to me following the issuing of the annual licence indicated at that point that the virus was highly contagious and easily spread. So in these circumstances, given my responsibility in relation to the conservation of the hare, I decided to suspend the licences issued to the Irish Coursing Club, as you know, on the 9th of August, until we had a clear understanding of the extent, spread and implications of the RHD2 virus as it emerged. In mid-October, I issued revised and restricted licences to the Irish Coursing Club last month to allow the netting and tagging of hares, but there are specific limitations and strict conditions attached to the issue of those licences. And I know, Deputy, that we had a topical question on this where I reiterated the details in relation to those trials and how we are conducting them.
Okay, thank you very much for your cooperation, Minister. Deputy.
Yeah, thank you. We have discussed this before. So while the RHD2 virus wasn't enough of a threat, it should have been, to ban live hare coursing, as should the well-documented injuries to the hares both before the coursing and during the coursing, and the fact that it's banned in practically every advanced country in the world. There's only 3 allowing it. All of that should have been enough to really bring in a ban on live hare coursing, but no, it continues. So my question relates to the results of a recent Red Sea poll that was carried out. 77% of Irish citizens want to see an end to live hare coursing, only 9% support it. Not to mention the extensive correspondence to your office, which was released through FOI, showing overwhelming support for a ban on live hare coursing. Now, coursing involves the blooding of the greyhound. Otherwise, why would a very gentle animal like a greyhound chase a hare with such ferocity? And we already have convictions for illegal hunting of hares. There were 2 in Offaly some months ago, and we know what happened on Whiddy Island. So I do think it's time to stand up to that 9% minority, because the reality is no licences, Minister, issued by you means no live hare coursing.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister.
Deputy, I think you're referring to a Red Sea poll. My understanding was an ISPCA poll, because there were 2, because the ISPA itself has actually welcomed the introduction of a testing regime and field studies on hares and rabbits, and I think it would be unusual if a poll is commissioned by the ISPA to find a poll that didn't support an organisation's views, just to mention that. But I do appreciate your concerns, Deputy, and as I said at the top of the question, suffice to say, from my own perspective, the protection and conservation of the hare is my primary concern, and I have to ensure a balanced response from government to this issue. But it should assuage your concerns somewhat that the strict conditions have been set down, and the Irish Coursing Club vet has to certify in writing that all the hares, for example, that are captured are healthy, and the number of courses will be reduced proportionately. As for the number that can be coursed, it can only be done twice. And these trials and field tests that are ongoing should give us a clearer picture as to the status and condition of the hares and rabbits. And there have been no new hares that have tested positive since the beginning of October. So that's important to note. Thank you.
You know, something like the Red Sea Pole there'll be some respect for that. You know, we're told that this is important for the rural economy. I don't accept that. The southern states before the American Civil War said that ending the slave trade there would also affect their rural economy. But banning live hare coursing, it's not going to impact on rural economy because there is a very viable alternative, which is drag coursing. So if the greyhounds will pursue a mechanical lure in racing, why can that not be tried in coursing instead of using timid wild hares and causing them pain and harm? And I just go back to a quote from my precursor, the late Tony Gregory. March 96, the only way to eliminate the cruelty is to have drag coursing where there's no live bait used. You know, there is a need for a responsible attitude to the sensitivity of animals. This is a debate between cruelty and compassion. And the one thing I would ask is that you would consider a working group that would look at that alternatives, which they have in other countries and where it is extremely viable and lucrative for the local economy.
Thank you very much. Final comment, Minister.
Thank you, Deputy. I did bring back the issue of dragging, which you raised with my department. You know, and I think you're familiar yourself with the 29 conditions that are associated with the licence in general terms. But in addition to that, we now have the other conditions which I've just set out to you there, reiterated to you earlier on. And their field tests are ongoing in Limerick, Tipperary, Cork and Cavan Town. They'll take about 10 weeks to conclude. So and it's important as well that we brought the Irish Coursing Club involved with it and the Department of Agriculture. But I am satisfied that there's swabbing, there's tagging, there's microchipping and that the certification is in writing as well. But we're constantly monitoring the situation. My door is always open to talk to both sides in relation to trying to find a solution.